Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And welcome to this week's Thoughtful Thursday. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Hacking Your Leadership and leave us a review on iTunes. On this episode, Lorenzo, I want to talk about something that has come up kind of in conversation with a lot of people recently. Over the last probably 5 or 10 years, something has kind of ramped up in terms of requirements for leaders, in terms of the skills needed to be a leader today versus a leader 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. And if you were to ask 100 people if they had to pick one skill that leaders need to be able to have today that maybe wasn't so necessary in the past, there could be a lot of different ones, but I bet you the one you'd hear more than any other is empathy. Mm-hmm. And you and I both know that empathy is a very important skill to have. I have said on this podcast famously that when I did the Clifton Strengths Finder through Gallup organization for the first time, empathy was number 34 out of 34 for me. And I used that as a kind of like a springboard to say, well, I have to get better at this. And keep in mind, this is 15 years ago, as a springboard to say, I need to be intentional on having more empathy. And I actually kind of taught myself to have empathy. And I believe I actually do have it now. I'm no longer faking it till I make it. I actually care. And for the longest time, I wouldn't say I didn't care. It was just that I was almost apathetic. I was kind of in my own little world, that kind of egocentric world that comes with just being a teenager or in your 20s. But the reason I want to bring this up is that I ran into somebody the other day who seemed to they were an empath for sure. They absolutely had a ton of empathy, more than I have. But the empathy that they were feeling towards somebody in that moment seemed almost debilitating to the point where they were unable to move forward. And it got me thinking, is there such a thing as having too much empathy?
Yes, I mean, we've covered it kind of like sideways a few different times, including I remember back in the Developer's Dark Side.
Right.
We talked a little bit about this as well. And I mean, for me, clearly the answer is yes. I think to your point, when you spend so much time, kind of in the feelings of others and kind of, working through that, it can freeze you in a way that you're not offering somebody the really support that they need sometimes. And I always think about it like this, family members and siblings and things like that, where of course, you're going to have empathy and you're going to feel a certain way, but you're also going to hold them to account sometimes, or you're also going to try to help them and support them by maybe either challenging them or supporting them through it or figuring things out. It's kind of you want to give people the space and time, and you want to be able to show people that you care and kind of respect their feelings and what they're going through. But then you also kind of feel obliged to help to get them through it and to kind of push them in a positive or a good direction. So I think, yes, I've seen leaders that have struggled with that have got so caught up in empathy that it's blinding them from, I think, helping people to get through it and spending more time allowing people to kind of get stuck in that space.
Right. I think empathy is like with any skill or character trait that falls under the banner of EQ, of emotional intelligence. It is a bell curve. There is a sweet spot, and there is not having enough, and there is having too much. Now, clearly, I think we both can agree that if you think about the workforce as a whole, the problem is not having enough. But individuals can absolutely have too much. And I think there are a lot of people who have migrated into leadership roles, and before they were in leadership roles, they had a ton of empathy. And it probably served them really well interacting with clients or customers in the role that they were at. But when it comes to becoming a leader of people, it can have more of a dark side, if you will, if you aren't able to kind of harness it and make sure that the right amount is being exerted on the situation as opposed to too much. And again, just like anything else with emotional intelligence, I know that one of the things that is a strength of yours is your includer. You include people, but clearly there's too much of that too. Like, you wouldn't reschedule a meeting 7 times because a different one person couldn't make it each time, and you wanted to make sure that all 5 people of the group have to be there. Oh, we'll reschedule again. Oh, we'll reschedule again. That's when taking includer to the too far is going. At some point, the work still has to get done, and empathy the exact same way. I think at some point, if the empathy you're feeling towards somebody is making you kind of crippled and not able to get your own job done, you kind of eliminated your usefulness or your skills as a leader. A leader can't just feel empathy. They have to actually feel empathy in a way that drives them to help the employee get through the problem, not just live in the muck with them. And so as a person who kind of, I think, is a naturally empathetic person, the question I want to ask you is, have you ever found yourself feeling maybe a little too much empathy for a person or a situation? So I want to ask you that, but first I want to give it up to word from one of our sponsors. All right, Lorenzo, tell me about a time when you might have had maybe a little too much empathy and how you kind of worked through that.
Well, similar to you sharing kind of where empathy landed for you in your own self-assessment, I have also famously shared this story of, leading a team where I was celebrating the team getting better, yet still performing under expectation. And the empathy that I was sharing was like, we're still learning, we're figuring this out, everybody's trying their best, like all of these types of feelings and things like that, where listening to the team and like just allowing there to be that space and allowing myself to celebrate less than expected or even just less than average, outcomes and results. And it was something that it was very challenging for me, and I wrote about it and I've talked about it, but that was a time when I realized that, like, people want empathy. They want you to have a sense of how they feel in certain situations, but also people want accountability. People want clarity. People want leaders that are that are going to make sure that when they need support, they get it, and that they're also going to be very clear and fair in making sure that we are all pulling our weight and that we're working together as a team, and that whatever the expectations are, they're the same for everybody. And that's kind of what the lesson that I learned. But it was a very, very hard lesson for me. It was very, very tough. And, looking back on it, just like almost laughing at myself to think about, like, man, like, how did I let these excuses and these stories and these types of things blind me from what the work was that needed to get done? But that was the lesson that I had to learn, and that was something that I had to lead through and work through and learn, and challenge myself to kind of grow, not only as a leader but just as a mature person.
Right. And I can see how that would be the case, because on the one hand, you want to celebrate the wins, right? You want to make sure that people feel good, that it's not like, you don't want to ever give your team the impression that no matter how hard they try, it's never going to be good enough, right? And so that clearly isn't the right way to go forward. But at some point in time, as the leader of people, your job is to deliver a certain result, not just one, but a lot of different ones. And doing a leader who does this well does it in a way that says, hey, look, this didn't meet the expectation. There's a lot more that has to get done here. So good job on the win that you do get. We need to make sure that we actually hit this next month or this next quarter or whatever it is. And I'm there with you, and we'll do it together. But, let's not celebrate too much here, because at the end of the day, we're still just like, most improved player doesn't necessarily get off the bench, and we still need to get off the bench here. So yeah, no, I agree with that. That's a good example. And the people I know who do this, who are empathetic to the point where it is crippling for them, what I see from them is that they end up losing the ability to change the perspective of the person who needs the empathy at the moment. Because a person who's needs empathy, if they're looking to you as their leader, something that comes along with that empathy is also the ability to say, we're going to get through this together. And so they're looking for you not just to hear them and to be able to walk a mile in their shoes with them, but to also at some point say, I know the way forward. Right? Because the person in the moment who's having the issue probably doesn't know the way forward, or they need some help, and you're the leader, and it's your job to pick that up. And if it's the blind leading the blind in whatever land you're in, at some point no one can find their way out. And so yes, absolutely be empathetic. Absolutely make sure that your people feel like that they have you as an ear who truly understands what they're going through, and not just someone who's going, yeah, okay, when are you going to get back to work? But at the end of the day, they're also looking for the confidence that you kind of exude as the leader that says, hey, I'm not just feeling your pain, but I can help you solve it too.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And have a great day.